So they say this card is supposed to be really good against D&T, but what about in D&T? Hello folks, Phil Gallagher aka ThrabenU for another Legacy video, and today Alexander has asked me to play Black-White Death and Taxes featuring Orcish Bowmasters, which is obviously one of the breakout cards from the Lord of the Rings set in terms of Legacy playability. I guess the first thing that I want to do here is just kind of talk about Death and Taxes generally speaking. For the vast majority of its life in Legacy, the deck has been mono white. That is just the version of the deck that gives the most consistency most of the time in terms of the mana base and in terms of matchup balance. But a lot of times when the format gets warped around some card, it becomes correct to splash, because as the format becomes just more specialized in one area, it becomes clearer what you need to attack, and sometimes the mono white builds don't have those tools. And I think most frequently you've probably seen Death and Taxes splash red, mostly for Magus of the Moon, because as deck lists get greedier and greedier, Magus of the Wind just becomes this boop, I win button against 4 and 5 color decks, while also giving you some very nice tools versus assorted utility lands that the format might have to offer. The first thing that I think people think about just conceptually when you tell them Black-White Death and Taxes is they go, oh, you can play discard in that. But there's actually a bit of a problem, and I think this is exacerbated a bit for the Yorion versions of the deck list. And it has to do with math. I'm going to leave that out of it. I'm going to leave the exact numbers out. Let's talk in generalities. Death and Taxes is a deck that plays a lot of utility lands. Generally speaking, the deck plays 4 Wasteland, 4 Rishadan Port, and it's not uncommon for other utility lands that don't produce true colored mana to be played as well. Or some of them produce specifically white mana. So think about your things like Karakas or a Gonjo. Sometimes you'll see Field of Ruin, Mutavault, Cavernous Souls, all those sorts of things. Well, if you are trying to play our good friend Thoughtseize, as a turn 1 play, every utility land that you are going to run actually makes that significantly less likely. So in order to play Thoughtseize in the sideboard, which is one of the big draws of black, we are going to need to drop a lot of the utility lands to just play more things that can produce black on turn 1. And that's probably going to mean maxing out on scrub lands and playing quite a few fetch lands to support it as well, or otherwise you can dip into some lands that are a little bit sketchy and have some downside. Black also offers a couple of really good silver bullets, mostly like Plague Engineer and Opposition Agent. Plague Engineer is just great against some matchups that can be very tough, such as Elves, while also doing some things like clearing out Mother of Runes in the mirror. For you older Legacy players, you probably remember Orzhov Pontiff serving a similar role, but this thing has Death Touch, which is super relevant versus, say, Urza Saga Construct tokens or something. But before we look at the deck list, let's just talk about Orcish Bowmasters within the context of this deck specifically. This is kind of another turn 2 hate bear, which is something that the deck very much wants. A lot of times you'll see splash D&T builds do something like, let's say you were going to blue, do a Lavinia or a Meddling Mage just to increase the number of reasonable turn 2 plays. This is kind of a turn 2 hate bear, at least in some matchups, while also serving as a removal spell. But more importantly, unlike many decks in the format that will play out an Orcish Bowmasters and then just wait for the opponent to do something that impacts it, with Flickerwisp and Yorion in the deck list, you gain the ability to blink your own Orcish Bowmasters and kind of take control of your destiny to ping things again and to either make some new orcs or make them larger. Let's go ahead and take a look at the deck list that I'm going to be playing today. Now, today's video is sponsored by Moxfield.com as well as Cool Stuff Inc. Remember, if you need any cards, use promo code ThrabenU at checkout at Cool Stuff Inc. to save 5% on your order. All right, so this is the full deck list in all of its glory, and let's start by taking a look at the mana base. Even with my highly conservative mana base here, only 18 of our 15 mana sources are actually going to produce black. So when I mulligan in post-sideboard games against combo and end up with like Thoughtseize, Plains, Caracas Wasteland, just be aware that is going to be a thing that happens a good period of time. Well then, Phil, why are you playing Thoughtseize if it's gonna be bad a good portion of the time? Alright, great question, Timmy. Let me cover that. Generally speaking, Death and Taxes is fine from turn 2 on versus combo, because a lot of times that's when like your Thalias and your Spirit of the Labyrinth start coming online, but you do need to make it to turn 2. And that's why a lot of times you'll see Fairy Macabre, Surgical Extraction, Mind Break Trap, Deafening Silence, all those sorts of things to help bridge to the Hate Bears. And Thoughtseize is going to serve that role. Versus a combo deck, curving a Thoughtseize into a Thalia or a Thoughtseize into a Spirit is one of the best things that you have available to you. So this is a time when you are taking raw power over consistency, whereas Death and Taxes is usually a deck that takes consistency over raw power. Mana base aside, most of the stuff that you'll see here is very stock to Death and Taxes. Note that since we are in black, we can actually hardcast a Leyline of the Void, which can be relevant in some games versus combo, where we do actually make it out of the early game. Overall, our mana base is going to be much more susceptible to things like Blood Moon and Back to Basics and Wasteland, and we'll see if really Orcish Bowmasters in particular makes it worth it. Let me know kind of in the comments down below what your thoughts are of this build after seeing it in action, and let's battle. Okay, I'm going to begin this game by just playing a Prismatic Vista and passing the turn. There's some fringe things that we do have to worry about, like Stifle and Dark Ritual Opposition Agent. But generally speaking, I think I gain more percentage points by looking like a control deck for the first turn than I do anything else here. Are we doomsdaying? Seems like we're doomsdaying. We're doomsdaying. So, interestingly here, my opponent is casting Doomsday into what they probably think is a control opponent. So if I rip something like Thalia, Wasteland, or Spirit of the Labyrinth, things might get saucy. Otherwise, I'll just probably sorcery speed play out an Orcish Bowmasters and pray for the best. Okay, personal tutor build with dazes. They do have the LED and consider pile, although they are not doing that. I see 1 Force of Will, 2 Force of Will, 3 Force of Will. So my opponent either has a Force of Will or has one in their pile, and I don't know which it is. I'm always going to get 1 basic Plains and 1 basic Swamp with the tools that I have available to me. I think because it's so important to draw certain cards right now, I am going to go ahead and fetch a basic now. I forgot to change my preferred Plains art. Alright. So that is not a super relevant draw here. I am going to sorcery speed this before my opponent has a chance to draw Force of Will, if they do not already have that in hand. And we're going to ping my opponent. They're at 9. 1 days, 2 days, 3 days? Alright, so I do get to ping them with that cycle here. I do get to ping them with that cycle here. So that puts them to 3. I wish I had a Solitude here to punish about what's about to happen. Yep. C'est la vie. Alright, so now we kind of get to test the whole Thoughtseize thing, right? Like, this is the sort of matchup where trying to punch a hole with Thoughtseize to get to the turn 2 play is super relevant. So we'll play Thoughtseize and Deafening Silence for sure. Surgical Extraction, like, kind of sucks, but every once in a while it will mess up the order of a Doomsday pile and just stop a win. It, like, is not very attractive. It's not particularly good, but it's one of those things where it's like, sometimes this is the best you've got. And if you do get to line up the dream, like, Thoughtseize Surgical play, it's super cool. So, my equipment package is not particularly strong. I will probably get rid of at least one piece of that. Like, I'll probably cut Jete. Lion Sash is not really at its best here. I tend to like to leave two pieces of equipment of some kind even when they're not particularly good, just so that, you know, if my opponent thought seizes me or whatever and takes my one piece of equipment, the follow-up Stoneforges aren't totally dead. Orcish Plowshares has limited utility versus the things that my opponent had in game one, but you do have to keep in mind that sometimes Doomsday decks will board into, you know, a Murktide Regent or Griefs or Sholdreds, and things like Baleful Strix are not uncommon either, although I don't think my opponent had that in their game one version. So I might get rid of some number of Swords to Plowshares, but I might not trim all of them. Maybe start with 2. I might get rid of all of them. I'll still have Solitudes and Kind of Wisps and Skyclaves as generic removal. Maybe I will get rid of all of them. I think my Plague Engineer is probably expendable. My opponent didn't show me main deck Baleful Strix. This is the literal sequence that I talked about in the deck tech, right? Of like being able to do a turn 1 Thalia into turn 1 Thoughtseize into turn 2 Thalia or Spirit of the Labyrinth. This is the dream, especially after my opponent mulligans to 5 here. So let's pick apart the remaining shreds of this hand. I will take the Doomsday. Alright, good shit. So we will probably see my opponent fetch and ponder would be my guess. And then I think playing the Spirit of the Labyrinth to fully shut off Brainstorm is going to be better than playing Thalia out. Yeah, because my opponent's probably going to play out the Lotus Petal in advance of Thalia happening, so just fully shutting off this card is probably more important. Yeah, let's deploy Spirit, and if my opponent wants to fire off a Brainstorm by sacrificing Lotus Petal here, I think I'm okay with that. Ooh, it is a Daze. It does set them back and make the Thalia for next turn better, but it makes their Brainstorm worse. It's hard for... Okay, a Ponder is fine. Anyway, it's hard for them to just, like, kind of naturally fire off a Brainstorm there that they know they will not be able to shuffle. Oh shit, they just found a Doomsday. Alright, nothing really interesting boarded in. One Brazen Borrower looks to be about the only major change, at least that I can see. So this puts them down to 9. Stoneforge is not super relevant here. I think I need to go ahead and fetch. I think I counted 3 Dazes in Graveyard. I can go ahead and play Thalia here while holding up Caracas Protection. I don't think Vial is relevant this game. Like, I could be wrong, but I think my opponent wins this one most of the time unless I draw like Mana Disruption, and I don't have Rashad Port in my deck, so it has to be like Wasteland. Recruiter is interesting. This puts my opponent to 7. I have a couple of lines. I can play Stoneforge. Kaldra is lethal next turn. Or I can play Recruiter getting Solitude, but 1, 2, 3 Dazes, so I believe my opponent probably has a Daze. There was a Grief boarded in as well, so I probably shouldn't take the Solitude line. I should take the line that plays around the known information. Okay, sure. But I think I'm just dead anyway. So the Brainstorm puts them to 2 in Library, and if I play Recruiter for Solitude, the Daze that I know they have in hand gets me. I just like have to hope they put Thassa's Oracle too far down to play around other things there. GG's. Today's video is sponsored by Moxfield.com, which is just the best place to keep your online deck lists. And one of the things that I love about them is that you can use it to keep track of what cards you do and don't have for a deck. So for example, in this deck list, I have all of the cards, so there are nice blue bubbles filled in here, and that's automatically ported over to your collection tab, where you can see exactly what cards you do and don't have. Okay, so this is obviously a mulligan. This is unexciting, but probably a keep. I'm nowhere near hardcasting Batterskull. That's okay for that to go back. We are hoping not to be playing against combo, because I am just very dead to combo, I think. At least like spell-based combo. Good news here is that I am on the play, so this vial can start the long, long journey of ticking up towards 5, which I am potentially going to want for this matchup for Solitude and Yorion Crystal Vein. I wonder if we're playing against like a Mystic Forge One Ring deck. Seems like we're trending in that direction. This is not traditionally a card that you play in Legacy unless you have a damn good reason. And wanting soul lands 9 through 12 is usually that reason. Okay, I have identified my opponent's deck off one card. Feels good. Uh-huh. Skyclave Apparition is going to be real fucking good in the not too distant future. Yep. It is Paradox Engine. So my opponent can do all the untappy things in the world. They need a piece of gas, which they may or may not have as of right now. I get to Skyclave whatever piece of gas they do eventually draw. And Lion Sash is maybe not the primo card in terms of ending games, but it can do some work. So, do you have it all? Is basically my question. Like, do you have a Mystic Forge or One Ring to start with as well? You do. I'm going to go ahead and F6 here, and they can do a whole lot of stuff. I think this is a time where I'm going to give you the Spark Notes version and let you know as things are being cast, but not necessarily narrate every single untappy tap. So we have another Voltaic Key. We are at Emrakul levels of mana already. And there is the One Ring. If you haven't seen my video from, it'll probably be last Monday for you all, where I played this deck, please consider checking it out to see what this deck is capable of. So now what my opponent can do is Voltaic Key, draw a bunch of cards with One Ring, and then Voltaic Key at a second time to draw a bunch more cards. I am going to die this turn, and it is just a question of when. I'm going to hop to something lethal going on the stack, because I don't think it's going to be real interesting from here, because my opponent is just going to draw their whole deck. Okay, there's the Karn the Great Creator going on the stack. That can get a Walking Ballista and kill me from these levels of mana. I am fine with conceding to Karn. That was a pretty ideal combo setup from my opponent. So we are going to try this whole not surgical extraction. We are going to try this whole Thoughtseize punch a hole to get to turn 2 thing, because Spirit of the Labyrinth is going to be very, very, very good in this matchup. We've got about 7 cards that we're looking at here. Plague Engineer not at its best. Swords to Plowshares can do something versus Urza Saga tokens, but otherwise is very unexciting. Similarly, Mother of Runes not particularly good versus the colorless deck, although that deck does play some copies of Dismember. So that's something to keep in mind. This is not an Umezawa's Jitte matchup for sure. And then I just have to decide what of the remaining stuff is the worst. I'm kind of looking at cutting Lion Sash, Mom, Swords. I cut 5 of these. I don't think I'm ever going to miss Lion Sash. And then it's like protection versus dismember versus hedging against Urza Saga tokens. Bowmasters is very good versus the One Ring, and not particularly good versus Mystic Forge. So we might have some tough turn 2 decisions with like Thalia versus Bowmasters versus Spirit. I think I'm going to pull. Maybe I split. So this is turn 2 Thalia, and I have to decide if that is good enough to keep. My opponent gets to vomit a whole bunch of stuff on turn 1, and I don't really have a follow-up play to this Thalia that is amazing. Skyclave can be okay versus One Ring and Mystic Forge. A lot of times they're going to have to give me another turn. I'm going to say that this is a keep, but I'm not excited about double vial here. And we'll just see how bad this is. This deck can go fast. It is a couple of keys. My opponent very well may just end up powering through my Thalia. This is always going to be another basic plains, so I'll just go ahead and grab that now. And drop Thalia. The issue is that if my opponent just goes like a land into a Grim Monolith, Manifold Key and Voltaic Key then just kind of allow them to pop off. Okay. Opal's fine. Okay. The scary things can now potentially happen. Yep. So this is so much mana. Alright, I'm going to F6. And they can potentially just combo off through a Thalia, depending on what exactly they have here. I'm hoping we end up in a pass the turn situation so that I can just Skyclave whatever it is they're about to play. Alright, it is a Karn. The Vial is off. They've only got 2 mana. There's probably going to be a Mystic Forge in the sideboard that they can get, or they may just end up with something like an Ensnaring Bridge, depending on what they have in hand. Ooh, it is a Lion's Eye Diamond. That is probably indicative of a Mystic Forge. Bowmasters would be such a good fucking draw here. Negative. Okay. So I can attack the Karn for 2. My opponent can't tutor with it. Or I can attack my opponent directly for 2 and Skyclave the Karn. But then I don't actually get to get a Mystic Forge or a One Ring that is played out, which is a huge problem. I don't have any degree of real pressure on this game. I don't have another 2-drop to put in with Aether Vial to be tricksy with. I think I poke Karn and put Yorion into my hand. I'm very unhappy about it. I think that's what I've got available to me. I am fine further thinning the deck here. And see how this goes. I am just not lining up well versus my opponent's draw here. Yep. I'm gonna just go ahead and F6. This is fully hands off the wheels. Yep. Alright, so we knew this would be a problem, so we kept the Skyclave to play around that. The exact wording of this is you have protection from everything, right? Okay, so I can still attack my opponent's Planeswalker. Saga's a problem for future me. I only have Wasteland, I don't have Rashadan Port. I've got like Solitude Yorion coming in the not too distant future. I can probably not die to Urza's Saga successfully. Alright, they're gonna just draw more cards with the One Ring. Mana is a somewhat limiting factor here, but my opponent could just discard their hand and crack LED here to have a chance at playing more of the cards that they draw with the One Ring. But that is not happening. Alright, so there's a Karn plus on nothing. And I do get another turn. Need to keep this ticking up. We will immediately be going to kill that Karn. And turn my Aether Vial back on. Fantastic. Note that I could wait till my opponent's upkeep to deal 2 damage to them with the One Ring, but allowing them to draw additional cards is probably just not acceptable. We're going to take out the One Ring and just hope they fully have mana in hand. I can't hardcast Solitude, I can't hardcast Yorion, which means we are on put cards named Aether Vial into play plan. And I mostly just hope that I draw another land so that I can hardcast a Solitude in my next turn, because these Urza Saga Construct tokens are big. Oh no, they've got cards to play. They've got big cards to play. Okay, that's fine. Just keep in mind that this also has text that can make creatures unblockable. There's Mystic Forge. Thalia's gonna help a bit here, but situation's still not great. Again, my opponent can crack out. and crack LED if they need to go and play cards off the top of their library with Mystic Forge, which we are seeing here. Karn's back. This is actually quite bad, because my opponent can minus get Walking Ballista, remove Thalia, and then rattle a shit ton of stuff off the top of their library. Oh, okay, that's fine. Oh, what if they turn their Mystic Forge into a 4/4 to block, and I get to Solitude it? That would be fucking cool. Okay, they are just tutoring. I don't get to live my dream. Alright, they're gonna do Walking Ballista next turn for a stupid large number. Vials go up. I do find a land, which is going to give me some respectable lines here. Let's go scrub. Let's attack and kill my opponent's Karn. Alright, good stuff. Now I will hardcast a Yorion, I think. We will just blink this one. I guess blinking this is fine. My opponent gets a token, but then I get to exile their Mystic Forge, and I just kind of hope that I can beat these Urza Saga tokens before my opponent does anything cool. Like, this Walking Ballista is just a huge problem, though. Like, I can Solitude it so they don't keep it around forever, but I don't have a game ender here. Like, I don't have a Serenity type card that just wipes all these artifacts, no Meltdown. And without that, I just don't think I can power through what my opponent has going on the other side of the table. Another Urza Saga as well. Yeah, so there's a Walking Ballista for X is 5. So they win all combats from here. I think you ping both of my small creatures here, and then attack with both of your creatures. Thalia does nothing this game. I'm gonna just take 4 life off Thalia here in hopes of keeping Yorion alive, maybe finding a Caracas and doing some nonsense at some point, but it is just incredibly unlikely that I can pull together something that wins from here. Just 2 more sets of Urza Saga tokens come next turn. This is too late. So I can flash in a Solitude. I can get rid of Walking Ballista now. Walking Ballista also takes down Solitude, puts me to 16. I have a 9/9 that will probably be closer to, I don't know, like maybe a 13/13 come their turn or something like that. 2 more of those immediately. Yeah, I'm comfortable conceding here. This does not feel like a good matchup. GG's. I am not excited about this opening hand. And I haven't played a ton of Yorion Death and Taxes recently. I have the mana for a endgame Yorion mana sink available to me, but one of the things I dislike about keeping a hand like this in this particular deck is I don't have Rishadan Port as a mana sink. I have a decent card versus control and combo. I have a decent card versus Faradex. I have land drops to hit. I have a turn 2 and turn 3 play. I'm not going to have a turn 1 play a lot of the time. Very, very, very reluctant mulligan. Like, I'm on the draw, so I get another card here, but at the same time being on the draw also means that I might just get run over. So we'll see. We are playing against a Ponder matchup, which means the Spirit of the Labyrinth will be good. It is not a snow-covered island, so we are not expecting Icefang Coatl. I think I'm going to try to look like a control deck for a turn and just shift my opponent's ideas about what they should be cantripping for. Then hit them with the juke of Spirit of the Labyrinth on turn 2. Found a Wasteland, which may or may not be relevant. So let's fetch. And I think I am not going to show them the black immediately. And just play another Plains. There is a line that punishes that, though. And it's me drawing Orcish Bowmasters next turn while also wanting to Wasteland my opponent. So we'll see if that scenario ends up happening. Okay. I do get to play Plague Engineer on Orc and clear both of those at the same time, but fuck. Alright. Yeah, one of the things I kind of dislike about Black Splash D&T is that, like, Orcish Bowmasters is also an X1 in an Orcish Bowmasters world. And I've been advocating for a red splash with the people that I've been tutoring, because, like, Magus of the Moon is an X2 and punishes greedy mana bases. Alright. I look forward to getting dazed. Correction, it is Force of Will pitching Baleful Strix. So we do want to go for it there, though, because if my opponent were to play a second Orcish Bowmasters, Cling to Dust. Okay, so we're either blue-black or Grixis control, and we're in it for the very, very long haul. Anyway, I want to clear the Orc token before it becomes a 2/2, if at all possible. There is a wastelandable land. I'm probably interested in wastelanding my opponent to keep them off of a color of mana. Yeah, this is fine. I also don't want them to accumulate mana so that they can, like, play things like Jace the Mind Sculptor and starting to escape this. Do I Skyclave? The Bowmasters itself isn't really doing anything right now. I have better Skyclave targets later in the game. I don't know that I want to just keep taking 2 chip damage every turn, though. This also just starts to give me creatures in play that I can flicker with Yorion later. And getting a density of creatures in play is going to matter, because my opponent will have a ton of 1-for-1 removal spells, expecting, like, lightning bolts, fatal pushes, that sort of stuff. And it's just cantrip a clock, that's fine. Yeah, I'm perfectly happy getting a removal spell out of my opponent there. We'll take some chip damage. I'm hoping to just draw any relevant card here. Negative? No relevant card for me. Am I going to Swords to Plowshares an illusion token? Maybe. I'll leave myself the option to. But I'll see if my opponent plays anything first main. That might change my decision. Like, they probably won't, but things happen. I wouldn't care if I traded with a spell like a Force of Negation if my opponent wanted to hardcast that. Alright, we're chilling. Orcish Bowmasters is a thing that can happen. My hand's quite bad. I can't play Yorion this turn. I can't play Yorion until I can protect it with Caracas. I am going to need to recycle that body and reuse them as this game goes on. But the thing that sucks is any turn where I don't force my opponent to play cards, they just get to do this. Nope, they are not willing to do it right now. I guess playing around Orcish Bowmasters. Am I really... like, I guess I'm very unhappy about it. And I'll fetch to thin. Don't need more lands. So my opponent can hardcast a Force of Will on my Yorion here. But will probably remain in that play pattern for the foreseeable future. I think since I have Kaldra right around the corner, I'm willing to just play this into Force of Will in hopes that Kaldra can resolve. Okay, cool. Yorion is in play. And is protected by Caracas. Sudden Edict would fucking suck. Snapcaster Mage is fine. Yeah, they're just taking more cards here. They're doing this in my post-combat main phase. And they will go ahead and fetch to cast the Brainstorm. I guess the thing that I have to watch out for other than Sudden Edict is double removal spell. I guess I'm mostly happy to just see my opponent making land drops here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But I never drop protection for Yorion until Yorion dies. We getting cute? I think we're getting cute. I'll go ahead and play a Flicker Wisp. Attempt to blink a Yorion. 2 damage to a target. Target player discards a card. Oh, that's so savage. Yep. Oh, that's so frustrating. But again, I have to leave up this, like, Caracas Yorion protection situation. I am not getting the value that I wanted out of this by, like, blinking something every time Yorion is happening, but hopefully just having a 4/5 body is perfectly fine. And again, fine with fetching too thin at this point. That's a very good draw. Let's see if it sticks. Force of Negation. Not unsurprising. I'll just go ahead and blast my opponent for 4 in the air. They're down to 10. I take a little chip damage back from Snapcaster Mage, but I'm not really super worried about life totals as of right now. Skyclave is a little medium as a draw. Like, it technically takes a Snapcaster Mage out of play, and like, I'll play it because I want extra bodies on board, but this does not make the short list of plays that I would like to be making right now, because my opponent will just use a removal spell on the Skyclave and then just have the same amount of power in play, and it technically upgrades the body from a 2-1 to a 2-2, which is technically relevant in a Bowmasters deck. Yep. That brings me to 8. Yep, that's exactly what I was talking about with upgrading the body. My opponent has now pulled ahead in terms of a clock. I might have to take some risky plays in order to stay in the game. So for example, I might need to attack my opponent, put them to 2, Caracas bounce Yorion, and lose the game to an opposing counterspell, which I really don't like. But my opponent has lightning bolts in their deck, so I don't really know. Okay. Yep. Now I'm no longer winning the race, like, at all. I do not like where I am at here. I think I am supposed to take out the Planeswalker. Otherwise, my opponent has very good mill-based lines, and I don't think I can attack this turn. If I attack this turn, I'm dead to literally any removal spell, and my opponent's playing Grixis Control, so they've got those in spades. Yeah, leaving with my opponent. Leaving my opponent with the Planeswalker opens up. God damn it. Yeah. So now my opponent attacks me with all of their creatures, and I die. GG's. I imagine I have minimal sideboarding to do here, right? Like, I am supposed to beat the fair decks most of the time in game 1 scenarios with my nice endgame inevitability, but I never got to blink anything with Yorion, and my opponent ignored the fact that I could protect it forever, while also sort of incidentally, randomly taking out the Kaldra they didn't know about, which was brutal. I don't think I want Thoughtseizes. Like, my opponent just has endgame top decks like Planeswalkers and Snapcaster Mages and Kolaghan's Commands that make fighting against them with Thoughtseize not seem like the best. So I think this is literal 1-card sideboard. I could take out Lauren, but Lauren does blow up Baleful Strix off a tutor, but I have plenty of other things that can attack Baleful Strix off tutor. I can see myself just like going down the Aether Vial and just becoming ever so slightly like real card dense. The Yorion version of this deck is less dependent on Vial anyway, in that you expect to play more opening hands without it. Aldre is here. I would categorize this as a fine but unexciting opening hand. Like, I don't want Kaldra, and I don't super want Solitude in the early game. Like, it's fine once I can start hard casting it, but early game, I'm just like super not excited about that. This hand eats it pretty hard in terms of tempo to a turn 1 Thoughtseize if I do not draw another 2-drop. But we have dodged that, luckily. And I think this is a Thalia. Thinking Thalia off of basic planes or Thalia off of Scrub. If my opponent has random wastelands, I think I want access to 2 different Scrub lands over the course of this game. Yeah, but I think we're going this direction to just tax my opponent's early resources. They can't remove Thalia in this turn cycle unless they tap out, presumably on their own turn to do that, and that sounds perfectly fine to me. But like, Orcish Bowmasters is a thing that exists, which is the thing that punishes me if I attempt to go for Thalia on this turn instead of just jamming the Stoneforge. So yeah. So now, again, I will be, I think, jamming a Stoneforge here. I don't think I need to remove Orcish Bowmasters immediately. I'm not drawing extra cards, so this thing is not super threatening while sitting in play. I'm not going to pick Batterskull here. I'm going to pick either Jitte or Lion Sash, because I have this Cauldron and my opponent doesn't know that. And if they think they don't have to remove my Stoneforge, they get a lot of value with the surprise. I think I'm going to go with Jitte. I think Jitte is the thing that is least likely to cause my opponent to just immediately remove the Stoneforge Mystic. Now, a really shitty thing that is about to happen is that if my opponent attacks with both of these 1/2 creatures, I cannot block because another Orcish Bowmasters just blows me out. Yeah, I know. No. Get got. I'm not going to Solitude here. I think my Recruiter of the Guard is just more valuable. Do you have another Bowmasters? I don't know. I hope not. But I can't get a non-X1 into play right now. I'm hoping to just Jitte equip next turn and take out both of these. That has been denied. I got a Jace for my troubles, which is cool. And this doesn't safely fetch a mountain, which is nice for me. We'll see. I can take my opponent off of red. I kind of need my mana right now, though. A fucking second Jace. Oh my god. Okay. I'm going to get buried real fast. I take 2 here. I can go up to 5 mana and cast a Solitude, remove a Bowmasters, and attempt to kill Jace the Mind Sculptor. But a removal spell fucks with that a lot. I think I need to put 2 bodies into play this turn. I think this turn needs to look something more like this as a starting point. And Stoneforge is a good get. Orcish Bowmasters is also a pretty good get. It punishes the onboard Jace pretty hard. So I think I'm going to go with that. This just removes an Orcish Bowmasters while putting multiple bodies into play. And the Jace minus is not necessarily the best against the board right now. And I have a Jitte for my next turn. I think I might need to set a draw step stop on my turn so that I can wasteland my opponent off of red. K command, returning Orcish Bowmasters. God damn it. Yeah. I feel like I don't want to be playing this deck anymore. Just the amount of impact that Orcish Bowmasters is having on this deck is just absolutely batshit insane. Okay. So my opponent doesn't attack, which makes it harder for me to punish some of their lines. Remove that stop now. I can Jitte attack and clear their board of creatures. Wastelanding them doesn't take them off of a color anymore. It might just be that I kill Jace when Cauldron actually happens. My opponent has edicts that answer that. Well, if I have my token around still, it doesn't actually super cleanly answer that. Okay, so I'm just going to pass with Solitude available. Is that true? Maybe that's not true. Maybe I just kill the Orc token and attack my opponent. Like, make them think this game is still about me attacking Jace when it's not. I really do want this token to play around edicts. Okay, yeah, I'm going to pass the turn with Solitude available. My opponent will just, like, draw Snapcaster Mage and punish me for my hubris. Snapcaster K command. Alright, it is a Strix. It is annoying, but, like, assuming I get this going, it's not actually the end of the world. I'm gonna just take 2 damage from that. Oh my god, again. I think in response... no. If they have access to a counterspell, I want them to use it on Solitude, potentially. Because I just need Cauldron to resolve to do disgusting things to my opponent. This is remove a Strix, I think. Death Touch is relevant, and I don't want to thin because I do want to draw a 7th land. Alright, fantastic. Pick up a basic just in case something like Back to Basics ends up happening. And attempt Cauldron. Uh-huh. Alright, it is a brainstorm. If I take this Jace off the board, I am in okay shape. God damn it. Now I don't care about this Orc token anymore, so this Orc token can attack Jace. I don't care if it trades with either one of those bodies. Actually maybe that's not true. I can Jete equip next turn and then the attack is more profitable. Okay, yeah, that's not true. I'm so dead here. Like, I have a Yorion coming, but my opponent has active Jace with 3 bodies in play and a billion available mana. Yeah, like, they're even comfortable attacking, right? Like, they're okay with what's going on. Don't like that. I'll attempt this. I fully do not expect it to work. I think I leave the planes in hand. Send this at Jace. Yep. I'm going to put Yorion to hand while leaving a basic land in my hand to insulate Yorion from K-command discard. Okay. Alright, so this is something that I had kind of dismissed earlier as maybe not being in my opponent's deck. Now we know. Got a fetch to clear that brainstorm. Alright, that's Snapcaster, presumably K-command. 2 damage and destroy target artifact, I am guessing are the modes. Yep. What am I taking? 2, 3, 4, 7. Go to 3, be dead to lightning bolt while my opponent has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 permanents on board. Alright. So I cast a Flicker Wisp. Flicker out the Orc token. Cast a Yorion. Flicker out my Flicker Wisp. I get to Flicker Wisp something out for a turn. What are my combat prospects like? Like, can I flicker out Jace? If I flicker out Jace and I block the 2 bigger bodies, I take 2 damage, assuming my opponent has no removal spell, which is not necessarily a safe assumption. I think if I am going to win this game, I need my opponent to just have absolute garbage right now. I'm going to flicker out Jace instead of just like opposition agent and hope for the best. I think I'm losing to a removal spell within a turn cycle or 2 anyway, so I think I'm just fully hoping my opponent's current cards are trash. My opponent's current cards are not trash, so they can just Jace bounce a creature out of the way and hit me for lethal. Fuck me. Alright. I quit Death and Taxes. This deck sucks. So I think my current problem with what I'm playing is I feel like all my opponents are playing with good new cards, and I'm just not. Like, I know Orcish Bowmasters is in my deck, but I have just, like, not felt Orcish Bowmasters pop off the way that I want it to. Oh, I hope I don't get just Dark Ritual Opposition agented out of this game. We're holding up the facade that I am a control deck. No, okay, I'm just gonna die a different way. That's fine. We're gonna play against Reanimator. We're gonna go 0-4. I can drop this league, eat lunch, and we can all move on with our lives and try again with a better deck tomorrow. Note, I'm not gonna Swords to Plowshares the grief there. We do have like good anti-graveyard stuff in the sideboard. Alright, that's unmask, target them. God damn it. God damn it. That is a Sire of Insanity, which makes me discard my entire hand. Cool. Fun format. Honestly, Sire of Insanity is so much more beatable than like a Grizzlebrand or an Atraxa or a Sarah's Emissary there. Like, I am good with this. Like, honestly and truly. Like, I'd guess I have a roughly 50% chance of winning this game still. Like, 6 power is an awkward amount because it's still a 4-turn clock. Haha, that's something that beats Sire of Insanity. Like, game's not over, but, you know. This buys a lot of time to find a Swords to Plowshares or whatever. And I basically can never use Wasteland in this game because my mana count is going to matter so much. So as long as the Sire of Insanity exists, I can't, for example, put Yorion into my hand. All right. I will eat 6 damage, go to 7, and my opponent discards their card. I'm just looking to make land drops here. Fantastic. So now I am stable versus Sire of Insanity. And these attacks just don't really matter anymore. My opponent can make them, and that's all fine and good. But my opponent now has a lot of rituals and things that they can draw that are just not going to be optimal. I'll Flicker Wisp. Doesn't really matter what I wisp here. So despite being at 7 life, I am now the beatdown. That is another basic swamp. Is my opponent not playing red? My opponent might not be playing red. Mono black Reanimator is technically possible. And I believe my attacks are correct here. Like, Sire of Insanity can't profitably attack anymore anyway due to Mother of Runes. I just need to get my chip damage in, reduce my opponent's life total so that a Grizzlebrand later on isn't a problem. So the next hurdle to jump through is my opponent getting a Grief, which is a creature that has Menace. But I should hopefully be able to naturally deal with that. Recruiter of the Guard is fine. It's just like significantly more awkward than normal, because I have to just play out whatever I get this turn, or otherwise I'm discarding it. So I have 2 options. Option 1 is get a Mother of Runes and have a better board. Option 2 is get a Solitude, discard a Solitude, so that if my opponent plays an Exhume, I can Solitude whatever creature that they play. I do not believe a second Mother of Runes is super relevant to this game, so I think I am going to do the Giga Chad Solitude play, but this may be me just kind of getting lost in the sauce. Actually, this play does have a downside. If I do this play and my opponent just draws a normal, like, Reanimate type card, no, they would just reanimate their own Atraxa over that. If they start getting multiple Reanimates, then it becomes relevant. I'm going to take second Mother of Runes here. I think I have talked myself out of the cute line. If I have a Mother of Runes for a creature on the ground and a Mother of Runes for a creature in the air, I am relatively strong versus what my opponent has going on. Alright. Play Vial. We're going to go ahead and activate a Mom, targeting a Recruiter so I can get in a 4th point of damage this turn. Again, against a Reanimate deck, every single point of life is relevant. One's at 10. Alright, there is Exhume. I get a Stoneforge Mystic. Alright, my opponent is going with Atraxa. I will use this ability. I will pick up a Lion Sash, and we'll see how good this is. There is a Reanimate, which is not necessarily as good as it looks. Might still be good enough, though. Reanimate, Delta, Sarah's Emissary. So if they reanimate, they go to 2, and then they'll return to 5. It's probably never Flicker Wisp, it's probably Recruiter. Discard the Lion Sash. My opponent's dead if they fetch, because I just have 4 damage available. I am also basically dead next turn. Might end up wastelanding my opponent's fetch land to try to make them fetch if I'm otherwise dead on board, which I am. I'll go ahead and wasteland the fetch land. My opponent was F6. They didn't even get a chance to make a misplay. Unfortunate. I have 3. I have 4 damage. Needed a live card here, or I needed my opponent to misplay. My opponent has 2 flying attackers. I will have no cards in hand, so there's no bluff here. I can't put Yorion into play. Yeah, I am a point of damage short. GG. It's possible this game goes differently if I do put the Solitude into the graveyard, because I remove the Atraxa, but That gives my opponent 7 life, which means that this isn't a one-turn race anymore, so this second body still probably ends up beating me. Yeah, top of the library was not looking good there. 4 Leyline, 1 Containment Priest, 4 Surgicals, and Thoughtseize. These 2 cards are playable and less exciting. I'm going to see kind of where things end up. Like, I don't want Plague Engineer. I don't want Jitte. Might cut the entire Stoneforge package. Sans Lion Sash. Tutoring for Lion Sash is like a thing in the mid game, though, that is definitely relevant. I still haven't seen red from my opponent, which makes evaluating Orcish Bowmasters a little tricky. I think I'm still going to play it. It's just like, it's like a very bad card if my opponent doesn't have Faithless Looting, though. Like, it at that point, it becomes like Text versus Grizzlebrand, and that's about it. Lauren and Skyclave are meh. They do things like hit Grief or Animate Dead. If I'm going to be bringing in a billion cards, I think I'm going to try just cutting the whole Stoneforge package. Leaves me with 3 more cuts to hit reasonable playability territory. It'll probably be a little bit of the 3-drop slot. Like, I'll leave myself a Flicker Wisp to tutor for, cut a Skyclave, and then I decide whether or not I want these. I think Deafening Silence gives me a pretty decent critical density of early plays. I'm a little worried that if I board the Stoneforge package out here, I'm just like a little too light on kill power. This is fine. Probably not my ideal, but I'm hoping this pokes a big enough hole in my opponent's hand to do some good. Let's Thoughtseize you. Oh, okay. So if I take Entomb, in order to go off on turn 1, they need to unmask themselves. That's fine, unless they don't go off on turn 1. In which case I lose Surgical, and then things get awkward. Still gonna take the Entomb, I think. Please just go for it on turn 1. They are not going for it on turn 1. It is unfortunate for me. I think the blowout potential that exists for my opponent going for it on turn 1, just like instantly winning me the game, is better than taking the Animate Dead. They have so many draws that just result in them being at the exact same spot for the next game. I will play out Spirit of the Labyrinth, despite the fact that it is just going to eat it to an Archon trigger some portion of the time. I just have to get a clock in play. Alright, Animate Dead is now live if my opponent has another black card as their final card, which they do. Pitching a Grizzlebrand. So they want Archon because they need to take Spirit out of play. I'll discard Recruiter here. They get to draw 1 card. I Swords to Plowshares this, and then we're in essentially top deck mode again, which I'm hoping favors me. But my opponent is at a pretty disgusting amount of life. There's not another creature in graveyard right now. It's very good for me if I draw a land. I won't be fetching here. Nice! Grab a Plains, black, black. Please don't Entomb in response. Thank you. Alright, we've got a pretty decent chance at winning this game now. Still have not seen any red from my opponent, so I am operating under the assumption that they are mono black Reanimator at this point. So, if I put Yorion to hand, and my opponent like Thoughtseizes it and reanimates it, that is not the best for me. But I am running on fumes here, so I will go ahead and take that line. Like, they can already reanimate a 3/1 threat, which is still pretty good when I'm at 13 life. Alright, cool. We dodged. Recruiter. That is certainly going to be better than playing Yorion. I'm not sure exactly what I recruit for, though. Do I have Containment Priest? I do have Containment Priest. A little awkward with like Yorion bounce recruiter nonsense that I would like to do, but is probably the safest line. So we'll flash this in end of turn and do some attacks on my opponent here. Caracas. That is reasonable backup here. Go ahead and attack. Put my opponent to 25. I'm going to take a second to look up, like, Yorion, Blinking, Containment Priest, multiple creatures entering at the same time. It was bugged on Magic Online for a while, and now I'm second guessing which way was the correct way it worked. Okay, yeah, so I believe this is fine, because Containment Priest enters the battlefield at the same time as the other creatures, meaning that this is okay. That's what I thought, but I'm in a scenario where that is worth checking. So my opponent takes 4, 5, 6, 7 damage next turn. I have graveyards on lockdown multiple different ways. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 6 mana available. This probably is just something like Lion Sash that can be a mana sink. It just gets big fast. And like I can eat all of the creatures out of my own graveyard here. And it's something that if my opponent reanimates it, I don't care. Also something that lives through something kind of wild like a massacre. Sure. Alright, goodbye, Lion Sash. Yeah, but I didn't want to get something like a Solitude and then have my opponent reanimate that and undo a lot of my good work. This is 7 damage. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mana. But I want 8 mana for what I'm about to do. That's fine. I wanted to be able to just like Bowmasters at the same time. Alright, so we Recruiter again. I have 7, which puts my opponent to 11. 4 power would do it, which is a little tough. I'm not going to 2-turn my opponent. I'll pick up something like a Thalia. My opponent is still operating on 1 land here. Alright, we go to a game 3 scenario. My opponent now knows that I have Leyline. I still just haven't seen any red cards, any red mana sources. Orcish Bowmasters utility versus Grizzlebrand alone might be enough to keep it in the deck. I think I'm okay with more or less how I've boarded. I believe this hand is too slow on the draw. I think I just have to have one of Surgical or Leyline in my opening hand, or it's just unreasonable. Like, Thoughtseize is good. Thoughtseize is better when you're on the play by a lot. And like, this is technically Thoughtseize into something that is Graveyard Disruption with like some reasonable support, but I really want a Leyline hand here. Very badly. I will fish further for it. I have found it. If my opponent is on mono black, Leyline is not coming out of play. I've not seen a single fetch land in a lot of cards. I think I'm going to keep this. I think Leyline goes back. It's never Thoughtseize going back. Wasteland is strictly worse than any of these other lands if my opponent is not on a mono black build. I am going to throw back a Scrubland. I still have white-white and white-black here. I am going to just keep this in case I'm wrong so that I can hedge against something like Serenity. Like if my opponent just plays a turn 1 Scrubland or something. It's just unusual how many basic swamps I have seen from my opponent. Well, let's see what's happening over there. Entomb, Reanimate, and Dark Ritual. Dark Ritual or Reanimate is going to be the take. Reanimate can hit my graveyard. Dark Ritual can help hardcast something like a Grief. I think I'm just going to take Reanimate. I expect we're probably playing a few turns of Draw Go. Part of me wants to Wasteland this Polluted Delta and see if my opponent is F6ing my turns like they were previously, but that's probably wrong. I'm just going to play a basic Plains and not fetch. My opponent like technically has access to something crazy like Dark Ritual plus Opposition Agent, but it's possible I am supposed to play Wasteland so that if my opponent is playing non-basic lands and they fetch one end of turn for some reason, I can punish that, but you know. I want to draw any castable spell here so that I don't have to make the choice of whether or not I put Yorion into my hand. Damn it. I think I don't play Yorion. I am gonna show Wasteland at this point, though. I just, like, can't beat a 4/5 Yorion right now with the things that I have going on my side of the battlefield. I also think it's somewhat likely that my opponent just Dark Rituals and Griefs me in the next turn or two, so if I'm going to put a Yorion into my hand, I would rather do it when I have the possibility of wanting to play it the following turn. More draw go from my opponent. Thank you, deck. Very cool. Still can't really beat a Yorion. Not sure if I want to put it in my hand. I think I will begrudgingly do it. This forces some action on my opponent's side of the battlefield, makes my Caracases and Flicker Wisps and such stronger, potentially like 2-for-1s my opponent by forcing them to, like... Okay, they do have other colors. So strange that we only saw basic swamp in all of those games. Alright. Oh. This is not going to go well for you, opponent. They're going to, like, Assassin's Trophy this. I get a basic. I destroy a land. I'll wasteland and destroy a second land, rather than playing Yorion here. And hopefully that ends up being good. Now my opponent can just, like, go land, Dark Ritual, all that nonsense. We're looking to draw any hate bear. Any hate bears out in the audience. We need to dodge lands and Lotus Petal, which we have done. Caracas is technically relevant, but not really what I'm looking for here. I will do one of these and fetch out a secondary land. Alright. My opponent gets to do the thing here. It punished for not playing out Caracas in some instances. Not in this one. So this instance hiding the Caracas was very good for me. And we'll just see how bad the rest of this turn is. I don't care about discard targeted at me. I care about another creature being produced. Yep, that is a dead card. My opponent's at 5, facing down 4 damage. They're unmasking themselves. Oh, they have a follow-up Archon of Cruelty. That's tough. Yeah, I have no creatures in graveyard. If I sacrifice this, I'll discard what Arid Mesa at this point. The points of life are relevant. I'm okay if I draw an out to Archon of Cruelty because I already have an out to Grizzlebrand. This is a fetch to thin situation. That is a turn late for saving my bacon. So I can go ahead and bounce Grizzlebrand back to hand. Alright, my opponent is going to 1. Man, Orcish Bowmasters there would have been a draw, huh? And there's no real point in playing my Thalia out here. I will lose both of my cards if I play that out rather than just one of them. Yeah, I've had a lot of opportunities to punish my opponent, and I just haven't been able to take advantage of them. I think I discard Thalia so that I have more mana if I draw into some sort of weird recruiter situation. I am at 5. My opponent has 14 cards and presumably can make another baddie or something. Alright, there's a Dark Ritual. A second one. Animate Dead on Yorion. Okay. So you want to blink your Archon for another trigger? This lets me put my Yorion back to my hand. So I'm not entirely sure. Oh, I see. You're going to do it that way. That's cute. So that blinks the Archon, dealing 3 damage to me. And then they can animate dead a different creature. And that takes out the remaining card in my hand. Discard this. I'm going to do that on Yorion. I guess I can bounce Archon out again. That's gross. So now I'm just deterministically dead to that ETB trigger. Have I used Containment Priest this game? I have not. Man, literal 1 card too late. That would have stopped Grizzlebrand last turn. Yeah, so Archon comes back and kills me, but my opponent getting cute with those lines left them effectively dead to Recruiter for Containment Priest. But that did not happen. So GG. And that is a 0-4 league. We're dropping. Alright, Alexander, you wanted to know how Black-White Death and Taxes looked right now. Not good. Not good is the answer. I just don't think this deck is playable right now. I think Orcish Bowmasters coming in is just an absolutely terrible time to be playing X1 creatures, especially until the format settles a little bit more. Like, just kind of looking at this deck list here and counting Orcish Bowmasters as something that is bad against Orcish Bowmasters. 17 of my 36 creatures are creatures that die to Orcish Bowmasters and don't trade favorably there. And I think that is a bad place to be. In addition to that, I don't think this deck has the raw power necessary to stop decks like the One Ring combo deck that is running around. Like, Thoughtseize helps, but that's 4 cards in your 80 card deck list. I don't have a real banger. Like, I even tried to hedge against that a little bit by like playing a Kataki that I could Recruiter for. But I don't feel like this build is where I want to be. I think if I am going to play Death and Taxes, and I wouldn't be caught dead playing this in a competitive tournament right now. But if I were going to be playing Death and Taxes, I think I would be on a red splash for Magus of the Moon. Like, it's an X2 creature that also gets you a lot of percentage points against greedy mana bases, and I think we're going to see a lot of that with like control decks at least having the option to go down the like delighted halfling route with a bunch of like Teferis and One Rings and stuff. But this deck did not feel good. Like, I was making decisions throughout the course of the league, and I'd say I made pretty good decisions on average. Like, there were some of them that were incredibly close, like with the do I put a Solitude into bin play against Reanimator. But I think a lot of times the Yorion deck gets its card advantage by having a bunch of bodies on board, and endgame Yorion is what allows you to break parity. But this Orcish Bowmaster world is pinging all of these small bodies like Recruiter of the Guard and Flicker Wisp that you normally flicker for value. And if you're not getting your normal amounts of Yorion value, then playing a deck that looks like this is maybe not going to be good. I will say we did not play against a traditional like bear blue like Bant deck or Delver deck. Grixis Control is something that a lot of times just absolutely dogpiles Death and Taxes because like cards like Culligan's Command and Plague Engineer just have such a high impact. So like maybe I just got a bad matchup spread today, but I am not excited about playing a deck that looks like this in anything that has real stakes. Folks, I hope you enjoyed. You know, if you think I'm wrong about my evaluation of this card in the shell, let me know down in the comments below, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day. I'm gonna go sleeve up some copies of the One Ring. See ya!